Activating combat mode.
Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is an HD remaster, not a remake, of the original game Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, which was released back on the PSP in 2007. Which means that the story, for better or for worse, is the exact same as it was in the original Crisis Core. This game was developed by Square Enix, but also co-directed by a company named TOS. TOS is known to be a ghost developer, who at times they don't even attach their name to the projects. This game was originally directed by Hajime Tabata, who eventually went on to direct Final Fantasy XV. Takeshi Asano, who didn't really find any information on, and everyone's favorite Tetsuya Nomura, who has some of the most controversial designs, and he's also directed Kingdom Hearts. Belts. Now this remaster totes 4 main differences that it has over the original. 1, they upgraded the soundtrack, so this game has some pretty good music in it. 2, they fully voice acted the entire dialogue of this game, although they didn't rewrite it, so even that terrible stuff from one character in particular that I'll get into later on has been fully voice acted as well. The third thing being they fully rehauled the visuals. It seems like they used a lot of assets from Final Fantasy VII Remake, which makes it look good, but at times it can kind of make it a little patchworky, but you do kind of adjust to it over time. For example, the Shinra building looks really polished, but some of the other zones just kind of have an unpolished look and feel to them. Now the fourth thing, and probably one of the most important things they did, was they rehauled the combat system. Now I never actually played the original Crisis Core, but I always remember hearing how rough it was, and how it would be unfun to play through it sometimes, and reviewing old footage, I can kind of see why people said that, and they definitely streamlined it a lot. Can this refreshed combat really outweigh some of the cringe dialogue this game has? I would say it mostly does, but you still wince when certain characters show up.
Infinite in mystery is the gift of the goddess.
This combat is pretty action-based, and it is somewhat similar to Remake, although it's a little more bare bones. You have attack and dodging, however there's no stagger gauge, and Zack does play pretty simple. He does eventually get a stance switch, but it doesn't really change the gameplay all that much. You also don't have the benefit of the time slow when going through your menus, so you have to be pretty quick on your feet. The quick materia use does feel pretty good and snappy, and you can actually use it sometimes to use skills like jump to quickly dodge attacks. I did find myself occasionally getting eviscerated by my foes when I was fumbling through my potions to get to my ethers, however, which was a little frustrating. The main gimmick of this game is the DMV, and I don't mean that you're making enemies stand in endless lines at 6 AM for licenses. This stands for the Digital Mind Wave, which is a fancy name for a slot machine. The big thing this upgraded DMV does is it doesn't stop the game completely when you do the slot reels. It just kind of keeps going in the background, and any of the scenes are completely skippable. The numbers can reflect the level of skill you end up using, but if you get 7s in any way, you start getting random buffs, like no MP, no AP, or even in some cases invincibility if you get all 7s. I tend to enjoy random little elements like this, so I did find it kind of fun. So when you match 3 characters or summons together, Zack will then use an ability from that person or cast the summon. This made Zack kind of remind me of a Blue Mage a little bit, only instead of using enemy abilities, he uses his friend's abilities. Like, for example, if you get 3 Sephiroths, he does Sephiroth's Octo Slash. 3 Aeriths, you get her Healing Wind.
Good luck. Thanks.
I actually thought the Turk Cisne's ability was one of the best, because it gives you crit on all of your moves, and it can be game-changing sometimes.
Do it, Zack.
Additionally, when you get 3 characters, you also sometimes get a little bonus cutscene, which I thought was pretty charming. It gives you additional context to the relationship Zack had with that person, and the memories he had when he bonded with them.
You're focusing just for the sake of it. Your true power hasn't been released.
Yeah, it didn't feel quite the same as before.
You need to learn to find the right zone in your mind. If you can't do that, you won't make first.
Seriously?
And the summons, which I feel were more rare to get on the wheel, actually do have unique effects as well. For example, Phoenix does damage and gives you auto life, which is really amazing, and Odin even has a chance to insta-death some enemies. Now I did play this game on hard mode because I thought Remake was a little too easy on normal, and this might be the same situation. And I feel like I was kind of right in thinking that. I wouldn't say the game's overly hard. The only thing I had to do is kind of think when I went against bosses, like tweaking my gear, making sure I had the right materia, and making sure I knew how to counter certain moves, but I would never say it got too difficult. And occasionally when I did hit a wall, I found all I had to do was upgrade my materia, and maybe do a couple of the optional missions at the save points, and I would have been leveled up and perfect to go. These optional missions are accessible at any save point, and they're quick little missions that you can do. I think they were designed to be able to be played on the go, since this was a PSP game after all. They can give you things like new materia, items, and in some cases even additional summons and item slots. It's also a good way to quickly level up new materia you get. When I first got access to these, I ended up going in completionist mode, which I kind of regret because I ended up being over leveled and it made the first chunk of the game pretty easy. So as you progress in the game, you will unlock more missions as you go, but also sometimes when you talk to characters, you'll also unlock additional missions as well. For example, there's a Scarf Guard you can talk to who gives you missions where you fight against Shinra guards. More on that guy later.
Security against soldier. We'll find out soon enough who the true elites are.
Part of me does feel like though these missions were deliberately designed to pad out this somewhat short game and add a couple extra hours to it, and after a while of doing these, they can kind of feel a little repetitive and grindy. They're pretty similar to the battle simulations you do in Final Fantasy VII Remake, only these don't really have that many unique enemies to them, but they do have a couple varying maps, so you're not always fighting in a computer bubble. So outside of these missions and squats, you'll be progressing through the story. I'm going to start walking into spoiler territory here, so you've been warned. My overall feeling of the story is I like the concept, but I feel like the execution just kind of misses the mark a little bit. Now, while it being fully voice acted is great, Zack's voice is annoying at first. Now, you do get used to it, but you get used to it in the way that you get used to the annoying kid in class. You just kind of deal with it.
Zack speaking. Angeal, what's going on? Why are we fighting Shinra troops?
That being said, though, I actually like the character of Zack. It was fun getting to know this character outside of the maybe 10 lines he has in Final Fantasy VII.
Hello to you, too.
Yeah, he has the anime trope of trying to be the hero, but I wouldn't say he's overly obnoxious or overbearing with it.
Come and get it.
Zack has a confidence as well as a genuineness to him. He's also pretty honorable, which is probably thanks to Angeal's mentorship. However, his honor is framed as honor as a soldier, but he also believes in seeing the good in people and trying to make sure everyone's reaching for their dreams.
Got it? Sir! We're all coming back here alive. You hear me?
He also has some game.
So pretty.
The face?
The eyes.
You like them? Then take a closer look. Eyes infused with Mako energy. A soldier trademark.
Oh, you.
Color of the sky, right?
Now throughout the story, Zack is trying to help his three main friends, Angeal, Sephiroth, and Genesis, although unfortunately they're a little too far gone. This game serves to get Sephiroth a human side. Throughout most of the game, he's a normal guy who's concerned about his friend Genesis and wondering why he's turned on Shinra. Genesis is degrading, and Sephiroth is unclear why he's unable to help him. It is eventually revealed by Genesis that Sephiroth is indeed an experiment himself, Project S,
Like myself. Genova Project S.
and that Sephiroth is a monster. Which Sephiroth at first doesn't believe him, but once he researches and finds out it's true, Sephiroth just all of a sudden decides, well, I guess I'm a monster, I gotta do monster things now, and burns down a whole town. It just seems kind of left field, I don't know.
I see. Perfect monster indeed.
Angeal's character is based around the concept of honor heavily, and he's actually considered the perfect experiment of Project G. The issue is, his idea of honor means eliminating things that cause suffering, and because he believes himself to be a monster now, he needs Zack to put him down because he believes he's causing suffering, which is just kind of silly. Even Zack doesn't really agree with it.
Yeah. But you're not one of them.
But I created my own suffering to prepare you for your next fight.
Have you lost it? Ah, stop it!
And even after you defeat Angeal, there's two copies of him running around, but both of these monsters are doing non-monstrous things, so it kind of furthers my point that just because you're a monster doesn't mean you have to do bad things.
Thank you.
Now of the three amigos, I definitely think Genesis is by far the most cringy of them.
The world needs a new hero.
Come and try.
Now I actually like the idea that there's multiple super soldier projects going on, and that these super soldiers, Sephiroth and Genesis and Angeal, are all kind of rivals with each other. But I feel like the execution of Genesis was also just a little whack. Genesis' design was based off of Dirge Cerberus, as well as a Japanese rock star, which that basically translates to that he's going to be in love with Affliction shirts.
That's no way to to talk to a hero!
Genesis is also constantly quoting the play Loveless to the point of annoyance, even thinking that himself, Angeal, and Sephiroth are the main characters within the play. And while it's kind of quirky at first, after a while it just gets degrading, just like his body.
Sacrifices and endings. I don't want to hear it.
It even gets to the point where Zack himself gets super annoyed with it, and I kind of found that endearing in Zack, to be honest.
Oh, the verse in Act 4 that leads into the final act?
Of course not.
There are various theories regarding the missing final act. However, only my theory is correct, and I will prove it to you.
No, that won't be necessary.
And apparently degradation just means you're slowly turning into Dante from the Devil May Cry series. Now once you defeat Genesis in the final battle, he falls into the life stream and ends up being cured of his degradation by this overly designed angel, and I just thought it was kind of weird. Like, I get the life streams curing him, but the angel thing was just a little weird. And after that, he kind of just turns normal and chill again. It's like all these characters just have radical personality changes frequently. Now after he's essentially abandoned in a field by Zack and Cloud, he is taken by Deep Ground to be further experimented on, which I have a feeling we're probably going to see him again in Rebirth. I'm also working on a theory prediction video for Rebirth, so if you're interested in checking that out, please subscribe.
Even if the morrow is barren of promises, nothing shall forestall my return.
The main problem I do have with the three amigos is that their personalities just radically change. They all go from being loyal soldiers, wanting to be heroes, granted by various means, to all of a sudden being like, well, dang it, I'm a monster. Gotta do monster things. And Zack even calls out all three of them on this point, and they're just all not listening. I assume it has to be some type of side effect from the Genova cells affecting their minds, but it's just kind of annoying. As mentioned before, the fact that there are two separate scientists that were working on Genova, Hojo and Dr. Hollander, was pretty interesting, but Professor Hollander was kind of a doof. He looks like Professor Birch from Pokemon, and the absurdity of his little baby wing he gets was just goofy, but I did find it funny how he throws worms at you and tries to beat you with his bag.
You'll feel my pain.
I absolutely loved it. The other thing that came off to me being a little goofy is how Zack's essentially playing Weekend at Bernie's with Cloud the entire time. It was almost comical at points.
Can I leave Cloud with you?
Yes.
They were almost like two drunken frat bros just staggering around, and then Zack just abandons Cloud out back by the dumpster while he goes picks up their Waffle House order, saying, "Be right back, bro."
Wait here, okay?
I also enjoyed seeing Zack and Aerith's relationship blossom. It was nice finding out that the reason she sells flowers and wears pink all the time is essentially because of Zack.
It's already been 4 years now.
I also thought it was kind of funny how she wrote 89 letters to Zack while he was in prison being experimented on, and that the Turks have kept 88 of them, the final letter being actually delivered to Zack by Angeal. And that final letter is actually the reason why he was in such a rush to get back to Midgar.
That this final letter that I'm writing gets
Clearly she loves him. I don't know if it's a healthy type of love, but she loves him.
4 years.
I will say, however, the final scene of this game is just amazing.
What do you mean, final?
When the Price of Freedom starts playing and you're fighting those waves of soldiers as Zack, it's just pretty impactful. I do, however, wish it lasted just a little bit longer.
Boy, oh boy. The price of freedom is steep.
I also really love the way his DMV activates and you start seeing the flashbacks of his favorite memories of each of the characters that are in your DMV, and then he holds on to Aerith until the very end.
hello.
Also, remember that scarfed soldier I mentioned earlier? He's actually one of the 3 guards that eventually kills Zack, and I think that's just a nice little touch. But the way they just gun Zack down is pretty brutal. You also get the nice touching scene where Zack finally gives the Buster Sword to Cloud, letting him know he's his living legacy. It's just kind of unfortunate Cloud doesn't really remember it because of his PTSD, Mako brain, and the cold Waffle House running through his veins. The game eventually closes with the beginning scene of Final Fantasy VII, and then drops the to be continued in Final Fantasy VII card. Now, while this game's ending was really amazing, I do think there's a problem sometimes when games have really amazing endings. You sort of forget about the funk that was there in the beginning. There's a lot of early 2000 cheese dialogues and aesthetics that just doesn't really hold up too well in the modern day, in my opinion.
I've come here to help you.
The goddess descends from the sky.
You also don't face a heavily varied group of enemies. I mean, a lot of the enemies you fight are Genesis copies, and by the time you fight them at the end, it feels like you've already fought them like 5 times before. And while the combat is fun and quick and snappy, there are just a couple basic strategies that seem to just constantly work. Just attack, attack, dodge, and you're pretty good to go. Now, this game is a remaster, though, and you have to give it some credit because it is leaps and bounds better than the original. Like, there's essentially no reason to ever go back and play the PSP version now, in my opinion. I think critically I'd give this game about a 7.6. It's good, but I wouldn't say it's great. If you pick this up without any knowledge of Final Fantasy VII or the era that it came from, you might find it a little weird and cringy. I think if you love Final Fantasy VII and are thirsty for more content before Rebirth, though, this is a good pickup. However, I would say maybe wait for a sale or something. I don't know if paying full price is really worth it. That being said, personally, I'm going to give it about an 8. It just barely becomes a great game, mostly due to the ending. It's got me excited for Rebirth and was a good placeholder. And the ending is going to stick with me, even though Zack looks like going to go on during it.